The rain hammered against the wide kitchen windows, like a warning from the sky. The afternoon everything in Marisol Ven's life shifted. She stood alone at her sink, sleeves rolled up, dishwater cooling around her hands as thunder cracked overhead. It wasn't the storm outside that worried her, it was the one brewing inside her chest. The heavy silence of a life that had become too predictable, too quiet, too unbearably hollow for a woman who once lived in vibrant color. She felt the weight of 43 years pressing on her shoulders all at once, turning each breath into a small battle. And then, just as lightning split the horizon in a brilliant white flash, she saw movement beyond the window, someone running through the downpour toward her porch, someone who did not belong to the world she thought she had already figured out. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kind Heart Stories. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Marisol's life had not always been dim. In her 20s, she built a promising career in interior design, her days filled with clients, colors, and laughter. She married young, a man named Adrian, whose charm once felt like the promise of a bright future. But seasons change, people shift, and cracks grow quietly in places no one expects. The marriage ended in a bitter, exhausted goodbye after nearly 2 decades together. She kept the house, but Adrian took something far more fragile, the sense of being wanted, of being seen. In the quiet years that followed, the world stepped back from her, and she stepped back from it. When the knock sounded on her door, sharp enough to make her flinch, she dried her hands, walked to the foyer, and opened it to find a soaked young man with gentle eyes, dripping hair, and a backpack slung over one shoulder. His breath was unsteady, as if he had been running for a long time. He introduced himself in a soft voice as Evan Hale, the new landscaper assigned by her neighborhood's maintenance service. His truck had broken down a mile away, he explained, and the sudden storm had forced him to seek shelter. Marisol, startled by the storm and the stranger's earnestness, stepped aside and let him inside. The warmth of her home wrapped around him, and for a moment she noticed something unusual in his expression, a mixture of gratitude, wonder, and a hint of something deeper she could not quite name. He appeared no older than 24, with a calmness about him that felt strangely grounding. She offered him a towel and tea, an act so simple yet so unfamiliar after years of living alone. The world did not prepare her for what came next. How naturally conversation flowed, how comfortable silence felt, how peaceful it was to hear another heartbeat within her walls. Over the next weeks, Evan returned not only to repair her overgrown yard, but also with unexpected kindnesses that wove themselves into her daily life. He brought her fresh herbs from his grandmother's garden, because he remembered she once mentioned cooking helped her relax. He repaired a broken fence panel she had been ignoring for nearly 6 months. He brought her a book, he said, reminded him of her quiet strength. He never flirted, never crossed a line, but there was something about the way he looked at her, steady, sincere, and utterly without judgment, that made Marisol feel younger than she had in years. But with every moment she found herself laughing with him, her guilt grew. She felt the weight of society's expectations like invisible chains, the belief that a woman her age should not feel her heart race for someone younger, that she should be content with solitude or age-appropriate companionship. She told herself Evan was simply kind, simply thoughtful, simply a good man. And yet, she felt something fluttering in her chest every time he arrived at her porch with that unconsciously warm smile. The turning point came on a sunlit morning that followed weeks of gentle routine. Evan had spent hours trimming branches and cleaning up storm debris. When he finished, Marisol brought out 2 glasses of lemonade, and they sat on the backyard steps, watching sunlight scatter across puddles in tiny, shimmering reflections. Evan told her about his childhood, how he grew up, helping his grandparents, how he loved the slow beauty of tending to things that needed careful hands. He spoke with such quiet passion that Marisol felt something loosen inside her, something she had forgotten she kept locked away. Without warning, exhaustion and emotion caught her off guard, and tears filled her eyes. She apologized immediately, embarrassed, but Evan shook his head gently and told her she didn't need to. No one had said something like that to her in years. She had spent so long being strong that she had forgotten what it felt like to be allowed to break. Over time, her fear became her fiercest battle. She feared judgment, feared desire, feared the idea of leaning on someone who might walk away just as easily as he had walked into her life. She feared letting herself feel anything at all. She tried to distance herself, tried to convince Evan she was fine, too busy, too tired, too uninterested. But he noticed the trembling in her voice, the way her eyes wandered away from him, the walls rebuilding themselves brick by brick. One evening, as the sun bled gold across her kitchen table, Marisol finally gathered the courage to tell him the truth. She told him she enjoyed his company too much, that he made her feel things she did not expect to feel again, but that she could not let herself believe any of it meant anything to him. Her voice cracked mid-sentence, and she covered her face with trembling hands. But Evan didn't step back. He stayed right where he was, and when she finally lifted her gaze, he looked at her with such quiet conviction it stole her breath. He told her the way he saw her had nothing to do with age, only with the calm gentleness she carried, the strength beneath her softness, the warmth she gave without noticing. He said it wasn't the grand things that drew him in, but the way she spoke to plants as she watered them, the way she closed her eyes when the morning breeze touched her face, the way she tried to hide her sadness behind politeness. He said those simple details made her extraordinary, and for the first time in years, she believed someone meant the words they were saying to her. Still, love is never simple. Rumors spread through the neighborhood. A few judgmental stares found their way to Marisol whenever she stepped outside. She caught pieces of hushed conversations about how inappropriate it was, how foolish, how embarrassing. The shame she thought she had shed returned heavier than ever. Yet, every time doubt clawed at her, Evan showed up with the same soft persistence, reminding her through small gestures that love does not need permission from anyone else to exist. He started leaving handwritten notes on her porch, short, steady reminders that she mattered. He began bringing her tiny moments of joy, a jar of honey because she liked it in her tea, a set of watercolor pencils because she once mentioned she used to draw, a bouquet of wildflowers he gathered himself simply because they reminded him of her spirit. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, Marisol allowed herself to lean toward the light he brought into her life. The biggest shift came not from Evan, but from her. One bright afternoon, she looked at herself in the mirror and realized she no longer saw a woman defined by the end of her marriage or the weight of years lost in quiet suffering. She saw someone beginning again, someone deserving of softness, someone reclaiming the right to feel cherished. She saw someone capable of love, not desperate, not ashamed, not afraid. And when she met Evan's eyes later that day, something in her chest finally exhaled. Love, she realized, was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was the gentle consistency of someone choosing you in small ways, every day. Sometimes it was a young man who brought hope back into a life that had been silent for too long. Sometimes it was the simplest things. As their bond deepened, the world around them slowly shifted. Some neighbors softened, others stayed cold, but neither mattered as much anymore. They walked together at sunrise, shared meals at her wooden kitchen table, planted a small garden in her backyard, and talked about dreams without fear. The rhythm of their lives intertwined naturally, beautifully, like two melodies blending into a single warm harmony. She had thought happiness was something she had used up, something she no longer deserved, but Evan taught her that joy could be rediscovered, even unexpectedly, even imperfectly. Near the end of their first year together, on a peaceful day lit by the warm glow of afternoon sunlight, Marisol realized her heart no longer trembled with fear, it beat with gratitude. The love Evan brought her came not from grand gestures or declarations, but from the simplest, purest, most human moments that stitched themselves quietly into her life. And in giving herself permission to receive that love, she began to heal the parts of her soul she once believed were broken beyond repair. If this story touched your heart in any way, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kind Hearts Stories. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who may need a moment of hope in their day. Special request, comment, kindness lives in the simplest things, if this story meant something to you.